Karma Yoga by Swami Vivekananda, Part 3. Chapter 6. Non-attachment is complete self-abnegation. Just as every action that emanates from us comes back to us as reaction, even so our actions may act on other people, and theirs on us. Perhaps all of you have observed it as a fact that when persons do evil actions, they become more and more evil. And when they begin to do good, they become stronger and stronger and learn to do good at all times. This intensification of the influence of action cannot be explained on any other ground than that we can act and react upon each other. To take an illustration from physical science, when I am doing a certain action, my mind may be said to be in a certain state of vibration. All minds which are in similar circumstance will have the tendency to be affected by my mind. If there are different stringed instruments tuned alike in one room, all of you may have noticed that when one is struck, the others have the tendency to vibrate so as to give the same note. Therefore, all minds that have the same tension, so to say, will be equally affected by the same thought. Of course, this influence of thought on mind will vary according to distance and other causes, but the mind is always open to being affected. Suppose I am doing an evil act. My mind is in a certain state of vibration, and all minds in the universe which are in a similar state have the possibility of being affected by the vibration of my mind. So, when I am doing a good action, my mind is in another state of vibration, and all minds similarly tuned have the possibility of being affected by my mind. And this power of my mind upon other minds is more or less according as the force of tuning tension is greater or lesser. Following this simile further, it is quite possible that, just as light waves may travel for millions of years before they reach any object, so thought waves may also travel hundreds of years before they meet an object with which they vibrate in unison. It is quite possible, therefore, that this atmosphere of ours is full of such thought pulsations, both good and evil. Every thought projected from every brain goes on pulsating, as it were, until it meets a fit object that will receive it. Any mind which is open to receive some of these impulses will take them immediately. So, when a man is doing evil actions, he has brought his mind to a certain state of tension, and all the waves which correspond to that state of tension, and which may be said to be already in the atmosphere, will struggle to enter into his mind. That is why an evildoer generally goes on doing more and more evil. His actions become intensified. Such also will be the case with the doer of good. He will open himself to all the good waves that exist in the atmosphere, also called the noosphere, and his good actions also will become intensified. We run, therefore, a twofold danger in doing evil. First, we open ourselves to all the evil influences surrounding us. Secondly, we create evil which affects others, maybe hundreds of years hence. In doing evil, we injure ourselves and others too. In doing good, we do good to ourselves and others as well. And, like all other forces in humanity, these forces of good and evil also gather strength from external forces. According to Karma Yoga, the action one has done cannot be destroyed until it has borne its fruit. No power in nature can stop it from yielding its results. If I do an evil action, I must suffer for it, in this life or the next. There is no power in the universe to stop it. Similarly, if I do a good action, there is no power in the universe which can stop its bearing good results. The cause may have its effect. Nothing can prevent or restrain this, ever. Now comes a very fine and serious question about Karma Yoga, namely, that these actions of ours, both good and evil, are intimately connected with each other. We cannot put a line of demarcation and say, this action is entirely good, and this action is entirely evil. There is no action which does not bear good and evil fruits at the same time. To take the closest example, I am talking to you, and some of you perhaps think I am doing good. Yet at the same time, perhaps I am killing thousands of microbes in the atmosphere. Thus I am doing evil to other things. When it is very near to us and affects those we know, we say that it is a very good action if it affects them in a good manner. For instance, you may call my speaking to you very good, but the microbes will not. The microbes you do not see, but you yourselves you see. The way in which my talk affects you is obvious to you, but how it affects the microbes is not obvious. And so, if we analyze our evil actions also, we may find that some good possibly results from our evil actions. He who in good action sees that there is something evil in it, and in the midst of evil sees that there is something good in it somewhere, somehow, has known the secret of work. But what follows from it? That, howsoever we may try, there cannot be any action which is perfectly pure, or any which is perfectly impure, taking purity and impurity in the sense of injury and non-injury. We cannot breathe or live without injuring some other entities, and every bit of the food we eat is taken away from another's mouth. Our very lives are crowding out other lives. It may be humans or animals or small microbes, but some one or other of these we have to crowd out or kill. That being the case, it naturally follows that perfection can never be attained by any work we do. We may work and work through all eternity, but there will be no way out of this intricate maze. You may work on and on and on. There will be no end to this inevitable association of good and evil in the results of work. The second point to consider regarding Karma Yoga is, what is the end of work? We find the vast majority of people in every country believing that there will be a time when this world will become perfect, when there will be no disease, nor death, nor unhappiness, nor wickedness. This is a very good idea, a good motive power to inspire and uplift the ignorant. But if we think for a moment, we shall find on the very face of it that it is impossible. How can it be, seeing that good and evil are the obverse and reverse of the same coin. How can you have good without evil at the same time? What is meant by perfection? A perfect life is a contradiction in terms. Life itself is a state of continuous struggle between ourselves and everything outside of us. Every moment we are fighting, actually, with external nature, and if we are defeated, our life ends. It is, for instance, a continuous struggle for food and air. If you have no food, you will die. If you have no air, you will die much quicker. Life is not a simple and smoothly flowing thing. It has a compound effect. This complex struggle between something inside and the external world is what we call life. So it is clear that when the struggle ceases, there will be an end of all life. What is meant by the ideal happiness is the cessation of this struggle. But then life would cease, for the struggle can only cease when life itself has ceased. We have seen already that in helping the world, we help ourselves. The main effect of work done for others is to purify ourselves. By means of the constant effort to do good to others, we are trying to forget ourselves. This forgetfulness of self is the one great lesson we have to learn in life. People foolishly think that they can make themselves happy, and after years of struggle, they find out at last that true happiness consists in killing selfishness, and that no one can make anyone happy except for themselves. Every act of charity, every thought of sympathy, every action of help, every good deed is taking so much of self-importance away from our little selves and making us think of ourselves as the lowest and the least, and therefore it is all good. Here we find that jnana, bhakti, and karma all come to one same point. The highest ideal is eternal and entire self-abnegation, where there is no I, but all is thou. And whether one is conscious or unconscious of it, karma yoga leads them to that end. A religious preacher of certain religions may become horrified at the idea of an impersonal God. He may insist on a personal God and wish to keep up his own identity and individuality, whatever he may mean by that. But his ideas of ethics, if they are really good, cannot but be based on the highest self-abnegation. It is the basis of all morality. You may extend it to men or animals or angels. It is the one basic idea, the one fundamental principle running through all ethical systems. You will find various classes of people in this world. First, there are the God-men whose self-abnegation is complete. They have self-actualized as the Creator. They only do good to others, even at the sacrifice of their own lives. These are the highest of humanity. If there were 100 of such in any one country, that country need never despair. But these people are very few. Next, there are the good men who do good to others so long as it does not injure themselves. And there is a third class who, to do good to themselves, injure others. They please themselves by harming others. It is said by a Sanskrit poet that there is a fourth unnameable class of people who injure others merely for injury's sake. Just as there are at one pole of existence the highest good humans who do good for the sake of doing good, so at the other pole there must be others who injure others just for the sake of injury. They do not gain anything thereby, but it is their nature to do evil. There are two Sanskrit words. One is pravriti, which means revolving towards, and the other is nivriti, which means revolving away. The revolving towards is what we call the world, the I, and mine. It includes all those things which are always enriching that sense of self, the me, with wealth and money and power and name and fame, and are which of a grasping nature, always tending to accumulate everything towards oneself. That is the pravitri, the natural tendency of every human being, taking everything from everywhere and heaping it around one's self. Both pravriti and nivriti, revolving towards and revolving away, are the nature of work. The former is evil work, selfish, and the latter is good work, unselfish. This nivriti is the fundamental basis of all morality and all religion, and the very perfection of it is entire self-abnegation, readiness to sacrifice mind and body and everything for any other being. When a person has reached that state, they have attained to the perfection of karma yoga. This is the highest result of goodness. Although a person has not studied a single system of philosophy, although they do not believe in any type of God, and never has believed, although they have not prayed even once in their whole life, if that simple power of good actions has brought that person to the state where they are ready to give up their life and all else for others, they have arrived at the same point to which the highest religious man could come through his prayers and the philosopher through his knowledge. And so you may find that the philosopher, the worker, and the devotee all meet at one point, that one point being self-abnegation. However much the systems of philosophy and religion may differ, all humanity stand in reverence and awe before the person who is ready to sacrifice themselves for others. Here it is not at all any question of creed or doctrine. Even people who are very much opposed to all religious ideas, when they see one of these acts of complete self-sacrifice, they feel that they must respect it. Have you not seen even a most bigoted Christian, when he reads Edwin Arnold's Light of Asia, stand in reverence of Buddha, who preached no God, who preached nothing but self-sacrifice? The only thing is that the bigot does not know that his own end and aim in life is exactly the same as that of those from whom he differs. The worshipper, by keeping constantly before him the idea of God and a surrounding of goodness, comes to the same point at last and says, "Thy will be done," and keeps nothing for himself. That is self-abnegation. The philosopher, with his knowledge, sees that the seeming self is a delusion and easily gives it up. It is self-abnegation. So, karma, bhakti, and jnana all meet here. And this is what was meant by all the great preachers of ancient times when they taught that God is not the world. There is one thing which is the world and another which is God, and this distinction is very true. What they mean by world is selfishness. Unselfishness is God. God is unselfishness. A person may live as a king on a throne in a golden palace and be perfectly unselfish, and then that person is self-actualized in God. Another may live in poverty in a hut and wear rags, have nothing in the world, yet, if he is selfish, he is intensely merged in the world of ego. To come back to one of our main points, we say that we cannot do good without at the same time doing some evil, or we cannot do evil without at the same time doing some good. Knowing this, how can we work? There have, therefore, been sects in this world who have, in an astoundingly preposterous way, preached a type of slow suicide as the only means to get out of the world. Because if a man lives, he has to kill poor little animals and poor little plants, or do injury to something or some other. So, according to these twisted minds, the only way out of the world is to die. The Jains have preached this doctrine as their highest ideal. This teaching seems to be very logical in one sense, but the true solution is found in the Bhagavad Gita. It is the theory of non-attachment. To be attached to nothing while doing our work of life. Know that you are separated entirely from the world, though you are in the world, and that whatever you may be doing in it, you are not doing that for your own sake. Any action that you do for yourself will bring its effect to bear upon you. If it is a good action, you will have to take the good effect, and if it is bad, you will have to take the bad effect. But any action that is not done for your own sake, whatever it be, will have no effect, no karma on you. There is to be found a very expressive sentence in our scriptures embodying this idea. The quote says, "Even if he killed the whole universe, or be himself killed, he is neither the killer nor the killed when he knows that he is not acting for himself at all." Therefore, Karma Yoga teaches, do not give up the world, live in the world. Imbibe its influences as much as you must, but if it be for your own enjoyment's sake, work not at all. Enjoyment should not be the goal. First, kill your small ego, and then take the whole world as yourself. As the old Christians used to say, this old man must die. This old man is the selfish idea that the whole world is made for our enjoyment. Foolish parents teach their children to pray, "O Lord, thou hast created this sun for me and this moon for me," as if the Lord has had nothing better else to do than create everything for these babies. Do not teach your children such nonsense. Then again, there are people who are foolish in another way. They teach us that all of these animals were created for us to kill and eat, and that this universe is for the enjoyment and possession of men. That is all foolishness. Do you think a tiger may say, "Humanity was created for me," and pray, "O Lord, how wicked are these men who do not come and place themselves before me to be eaten. They are breaking your law"? If the world is created for us, we are also created for the world. That this world is created for our enjoyment is the most wicked idea that holds us down and traps us in the 3D world of karma and ego. This world is not for our sake. Millions die every year, and the world does not feel it. Millions of others are born in their place. Just as much as the world is for us, so we also are for the world. To work properly, therefore, you have first to give up the idea of attachment. Secondly, do not mix in the fray. Hold yourself as a witness and go on working. My master used to say, "Look upon your children as a nurse does. The nurse will take your baby and fondle it and play with it and behave towards it as gently as if it were her own child. But as soon as it is time for her to leave, she takes her bag and goes home. Everything in the shape of attachment is forgotten. It will not give the ordinary nurse the least pang to leave your children and take up other children. Be that way with all that you consider to be yours. You are the nurse, and if you believe in God, believe that all of these things which you consider yours are really God's. The greatest weakness often insinuates itself as the greatest good and strength. It is a weakness to think that anyone is dependent on me and that I can do good to another. This belief is the mother of all our attachments, and through this attachment comes all our pain. We must inform our minds that no one in this universe depends upon us. Not one beggar depends on our charity. Not one soul depends on our kindness. Not one living thing depends on our help. All are helped by existence itself, and will be so helped even if 1 billion of us died in 1 second. The course of nature will not stop for such as you and me. Nature is. Reality exists, as already pointed out, only as a blessed privilege to you and to me that we are allowed, in the way of helping others, to educate ourselves and evolve our consciousness. This is a great lesson to learn in life, and when we have learned it fully, we shall never be unhappy. We can go and mix without harm in society, anywhere and everywhere, and do anything and never be unhappy. You may have wives and husbands and regiments of servants and kingdoms to govern. If only you act on the principle that this world is not for you and does not inevitably need you, they can do you no harm, no matter what you do. Perhaps this year or last, some of your friends may have died. Is the world stopped and waiting to go on without them? No, the world goes on. So drive out of your mind the idea that you have to do something for the world. Nor did they. They died. Their work was done. The world does not require any help from you or anyone. It is sheer nonsense on the part of any man to think that he is born to help the world. That is simply pride. It is selfishness insinuating itself in the form of virtue. When you have trained your mind and your nerves to realize this idea of the world's non-dependence on you or on anybody, there will then be no reaction in the form of pain resulting from work. When you give something to anyone and expect nothing back, not even expecting that person to be grateful, if they are ingrateful, it will not have any effect on you because you never expected anything. You never thought you had any right to anything in the way of return. You gave them what you felt was correct. Why should you be proud of having given anything away? You are the porter that carried the money or other kind of gift, and the world deserved it by its own karma. Where is then the reason for your pride for something you did? There is nothing very great in what you give to the world. When you have acquired the feeling of non-attachment, there will then be neither good nor evil for you. It is only selfishness that causes the concept of the difference between good and evil. This is a very hard thing to understand, but you will come to learn in time that nothing in the universe has power over you until you allow it to exercise such a power. Nothing has power over the self of anyone until the self becomes a fool and loses its independence, which is possibly fun for a while. But it's a game. It is not real. So, by non-attachment, you overcome and deny the power of anything to act upon you and control you. It is very easy to say that nothing has the right to act upon you until you allow it to do so. But what is the true sign of the person who really does not allow anything to work upon them? The person who is neither happy nor unhappy when acted upon by the external world. The sign that that person is living without attachment is that no amount of good fortune or ill fortune causes any change in their mind. In all conditions, they continue to remain the same. There was once a great sage in India called Vyasa. This Vyasa is known as the author of the Vedanta aphorisms and was a holy man. His father had tried to become a very perfect man and had failed. His grandfather had also tried and failed to become perfect. His great-grandfather had similarly tried and failed. Vyasa himself did not quite succeed perfectly, but his son Shuka was born perfect. Vyasa taught his son wisdom, and after teaching him the knowledge of truth himself, he sent him to the court of King Janaka. He was a great king and was called Janaka Videha. Videha means without a body. Although he was a king, he had entirely forgotten that he was a body. He felt that he was a spirit at all times. the boy, Shuka, was sent to be taught by him. The king knew that Vyasa's son was coming to him to learn wisdom, so he made arrangements beforehand. And when the boy presented himself at the gates of the palace, the guards took no notice of him whatsoever, except to give him a chair. And he sat there for 3 days and nights, nobody speaking to him on request from the king. Nobody asking him who he was or why he was there. He was the son of a very great sage. His father was honored by the whole country already, and he himself was a most respectable person. Yet these low, vulgar guards of the palace would take no notice of him. After that, suddenly, the ministers of the king and all the big officials came down to the gates and received Shuka with the greatest of honors. They conducted him inside and showed him into splendid rooms, giving him the most fragrant baths and wonderful foods and clothing, and for 8 days they kept him there in all kinds of luxury. The solemnly serene face of the boy Shuka did not change even in the smallest by the change in treatment accorded to him. He was the same in the midst of this luxury as when sitting at the chair ignored by the door. Finally, he was brought before the king. The king was on his throne. Music was playing, beautiful women were dancing, and other amusements were going on. The king then gave Shuka a cup of milk filled to the brim and asked him to walk 7 times around the hall without spilling even a drop. The boy took the cup without a word and proceeded, in the midst of the music and the celebrations and the dancing and the attraction of the beautiful faces. As desired by the king, 7 times did he go around, and not a drop of milk was spilt. The boy's mind was not attracted or distracted by anything in the external world. When he brought the cup to the king said to him, "What your father has taught you, and what you have learned for yourself, I could only repeat. You already know the truth. Go home, boy." Thus, the person who has practiced control over themselves cannot be acted upon by anything external. There is no more slavery for them. Their mind has become free. Such a person alone is fit to live well in this world. We generally find men holding 2 opinions regarding this world. Some are pessimists and say, "How horrible this world is, how wicked." Some others are optimists and say, "How beautiful this world is, how wonderful." To those who have not controlled their own minds, the world is either full of evil or full of good, or a mixture of good and evil. This very world will become to us truly, cosmically, an optimistic world when we become masters of our own minds. Nothing then will work upon us as good or evil. We shall find everything in its proper place to be harmonious. Some people who begin by saying that the world is a hell may end by saying that it is a heaven when they succeed in the practice of self-control. If we are genuine karma yogis, and wish to train ourselves to that attainment of this state of freedom. Wherever we may begin, we are sure to end in perfect self-abnegation. And as soon as this seeming small self, the ego, has gone, the whole world, which at first appeared to us to be filled with evil or filled with good, will appear to be heavenly, perfect, and full of blessedness. The very atmosphere will be blessed. Every human face, no matter what they do, will be a holy hologram of God. Such is the end and aim of karma yoga. Such is its perfection in practical living. Our various types of yoga do not conflict with each other. Each of them leads us to the same goal, to make us perfectly free. Only each has to be strenuously practiced. The whole secret is in the practicing. First you have to hear the teachings, then think about it, and then practice them. This is true of every yoga. You have first to hear about it and understand what it is, and many things which you do not understand will be made clear to you by constant hearing and thinking. It is very challenging to understand everything at once. The explanation of everything is, after all, already existing in you. No one is ever really taught by another. Each of us has to teach themselves. The external teacher offers only the suggestion which rouses the internal teacher to work to understand things. Then things will be made clearer to us by our own power of perception and thought and our own actions. And we will realize them in our own souls, and that realization will grow into the intense power of will to act. First it is feeling, then it becomes willing, and out of that willing comes the tremendous force for work that will go through every vein and nerve and muscle until the whole mass of your body is changed into an instrument of unselfish yoga of work. And the desired result of perfect self-abnegation and utter unselfishness is finally attained. This attainment does not depend on any dogma or doctrine or belief. Whether a person is a Christian or Jew or Gentile or Buddhist, it does not matter. Are you unselfish? That is the question. If you are, you will be perfect without reading a single religious book, without going into a single church or temple. Each one of our yogas is fitted to make a person perfect, even without the help of the other yogas, because they all have the same goal in view. Karma yoga, the yogas of work, the yogas of wisdom, the yogas of devotion, are all capable of serving as direct and independent means for obtaining of moksha. Fools alone say that work and philosophy are different, but not the wise one. The wise one knows that, though apparently different from each other, they at last lead to the same goal of freedom, perfection, unattached self-abnegation. Chapter 7, Freedom. In addition to meaning work, we have stated that psychologically the word karma also implies causation. Any work, any action, any thought that produces an effect is called a karma. Thus, the law of karma means the law of causation, of inevitable cause and effect. Wheresoever there is a cause, there an effect must be produced. This necessity cannot be resisted, and this law of karma, according to our philosophy, is true throughout all of existence, every possible universe. Whatever we see or feel or do, whatever action there is anywhere in the universe, while being the effect of past work on the one hand, becomes on the other a cause in its turn and produces its own effect. It is necessary, together with this, to consider what is meant by the word law. By law is meant the tendency of a series to repeat itself. When we see one event followed by another, or sometimes happening simultaneously with another, we expect this sequence or coexistence to recur. Our old logicians and philosophers of the Nyaya school call this the law by the name of Vyapti. According to them, all our ideas of law are due to association. A series of phenomena becomes associated with things in our minds in a sort of invariable order, so that whatever we perceive at any time is immediately referred to other facts in the mind. Any one idea, or, according to our psychology, any one wave that is produced in the ocean mind stuff, citta, must always give rise to many similar waves. This is the psychological idea of association. And causation is only an aspect of this grand, pervasive principle of association. This pervasiveness of association is what is, in Sanskrit, called Vyapti. In the external world, the ideas of law is the same as in the internal. The expectation that a particular phenomena will be followed by another, and that the series will repeat itself, is what we call law. Actually speaking, therefore, law does not exist in nature. In all fact, it is an error to say that gravitation exists in the earth, or that there is any law existing objectively anywhere in nature. Law is the method, the manner in which our mind grasps a series of phenomena. It is all in the mind. Certain phenomena happening one after another or simultaneously, and followed by the conviction of the regularity of their reoccurrence, thus enabling our minds to grasp the method of the whole series, constitutes what we call laws. The next question for consideration is what we mean by a law being universal. Our universe is that portion of existence which is characterized by what the Sanskrit psychologists call desha, kala, nimitta, or what is known to European psychology as space, time, and causation. This universe is only a part of infinite existence, thrown into a particular mold composed of space, time, and causation. it necessarily follows that law is possible only within this conditioned universe. Beyond it, there cannot be any law. When we speak of the universe, we only mean that portion of existence which is limited by our mind, the universe of the senses, which we can see, feel, touch, hear, think of, taste, or imagine. This alone is under law, but beyond it, existence cannot be subject to law, because causation does not extend beyond the world of our minds. Anything beyond the range of our mind and our senses is not bound by the law of causation, as there is no mental association of things in the region beyond the senses, and no causation without association of ideas. It is only when being, or existence, gets molded into name and form that it obeys the law of causation and is said to be under law, because all law has its essence in causation. Therefore, we see at once that there cannot be any such thing as free will. The very words are a contradiction, because will is what we know, and everything that we know is within our mind, and everything within our mind is molded by the conditions of space, time, and causation of our small section of the universe. Everything that we know or can possibly know must be subject to causation, and that which obeys the laws of causation cannot be free. It is acted upon by other agents that caused it, and becomes a cause in its turn. But that which has become converted into the will of the individual, which was not the will before, but which, when it fell into this mold of space, time, and causation, became converted into human will, is free. And when this will gets out of this mold of space, time, and causation, it will be free again. From freedom it comes, and becomes molded into this bondage of physicality, and it gets out and goes back to freedom again. The question has been raised as to from whom this universe comes. In whom does it rest, and to whom does it go? And the answer has been given that from freedom it comes. In bondage it rests, and goes back into that freedom again. So when we speak of humanity as no other than that infinite being which is manifesting itself finitely, we mean that only one very small part thereof is humanity. This body and this mind which we see are only one part of the whole, only one spot of the infinite wholeness being itself. This whole universe we see is only one speck of the infinite being, and all our laws, all our bondages, all our joys and all our sorrows, our happiness and our expectations are only within one tiny portion of the universe. All our progression and digression are all within a tiny fraction. So you see how childish it is to expect a continuation of this universe, which is a creation in our mind, and even to expect to go to heaven, which after all must mean only a repetition of this world that we know, but slightly better. You see at once that it is an impossible and childish desire to make the whole of infinite existence conform to the limited and conditioned mind. When a man says that he will have again and again the same thing which he is hating now, or, as I sometimes put it, when he asks for a comfortable religion, you may know that he has become so degenerate that he cannot think of anything higher than what he is now. He is just his little present surroundings and nothing more. He has forgotten that he is infinity itself. And his whole idea is confined to these little joys on this one little planet, and his sorrows and frustrations and his jealousies of the moment. He thinks that this finite little planet and his little lifetime on it is the infinite. And not only so, he will not let this foolishness go. He clings desperately to this illusion, for which he will kill or die. There may be millions of kinds of happiness, and billions of beings, and trillions of laws, and there may be progress and causation, all acting outside the little universe that we know. And, after all, the whole of this comprises but one tiny fragment of infinity. We are infinite. To acquire freedom, we have to get beyond the limitations of this universe. It cannot be found here in this world. Freedom cannot be found in the world. Perfect equilibrium, or what the Christians call the peace that passeth all understanding, cannot be had in this world, nor in heaven, nor in any place where our minds and thoughts can go, where the senses can feel, or which the imagination can conceive. No such place can give us that freedom, because all such places would be within our universe, within our mind, and is limited by space, time, and causation. There may be places that are more ethereal than this earth of ours, where pleasures may be finer. But even those places must be in the universe, and therefore in bondage to laws. So we have to go beyond, and real spirituality begins where this little universe ends. These little joys and sorrows and knowledge of things end there, and the reality begins. Until we give up the craving for more, the strong attachment to this, our transient, conditioned existence, we have no hope of catching even a glimpse of that infinite freedom that does exist beyond our concepts. It stands to reason, then, that there is only one way to attain that freedom, which is the goal of all of the noblest aspirations of humankind, and that is by giving up this little life, by giving up your shadow ego, by giving up your concepts of the universe, by giving up the earth, by giving up heaven, by giving up your body, by giving up your mind, by giving up everything that is limited and conditioned. When we give up our attachment to this little universe of the senses or of the mind, we shall be free immediately. The only way to come out of bondage to karma is to go beyond the limitations of law, to go beyond causation. But it is a most difficult thing to give up the clinging to this reality, this universe, this world, this body. Few ever attain that. There are two ways to do it mentioned in our books. One is called the neti, not this, not this. The other is called iti, this. The former is the negative and the latter is the positive way. The negative way is the most difficult. It is only possible to people of the very highest exceptional mind and gigantic will who simply stand up and say, "No, I will not have this." And their mind and body obeys their will, and they come out successfully to freedom. But such people are very rare. The vast majority of humankind choose the positive way, the way through the world, making use of all the bondages themselves to break those very bonds. This is also a kind of giving up, only it is done slowly and gradually by knowing things, enjoying things, and thus obtaining experience, and knowing the nature of things until the mind lets them all go at last and finally becomes unattached. The former way of obtaining non-attachment is by reasoning, and the latter way is by through work and experience. The first is the path of Jnana Yoga, and is characterized by the refusal to do any work. The second is that of Karma Yoga, in which there is no cessation from work. Everyone must work in the universe. Only those who are perfectly satisfied with the self, whose desires do not go beyond the self, whose mind never strays out of the self, to whom the self is all in all. Only those can do no work and be free. The rest of us must work. A current of water rushing down of its own nature falls into a hollow and makes a little whirlpool, and after running a little in that whirlpool, it emerges again in the form of a little river to go on unchecked to the sea. Each human life is like that current. It gets into a whirl, gets involved in this world of space, time, and causation, whirls around a little, crying out, "Oh, my father, my brother, my wife, my children, my name, my fame, my money, my house," and so on and so on, and at last emerges out of it and regains its original freedom. The whole universe as we know it is doing that. Whether we know it or not, whether we are conscious or unconscious of it, we are all working to get out of the dream of this world, of this whirlpool. Man's experience in this world is to enable himself to get out of his own created whirlpool. What is karma yoga? The knowledge of the secret of work. We see that the whole universe is working, spinning, moving. For what? For salvation, for liberty. From the atom to the highest being, everything is working for that one end. Liberty for the mind, for the body, for the spirit. All things are spinning, trying to get to freedom, flying away from bondage. The sun, the moon, the earth, the planets are all trying to fly away from bondage. The centrifugal and the centripetal forces of nature are indeed typical in our universe. Instead of being knocked about in this universe, and after long delay of thrashing, getting to know things as they are, we learn from karma yoga the secret of work, the method of work, the organizing power of work. A vast mass of energy may be spent in vain if we do not know how to utilize it. Karma yoga makes a science of work. You learn it by how best to utilize all the workings of this world. Work is inevitable, it must be done, but we should work to the highest purpose. Karma yoga makes us admit that this world is a world of merely 5 minutes, that it is something we merely have to pass through, and that freedom will not be found here, but it is only to be found beyond. To find the way out of bondage of the world, we have to go through it slowly and surely. There may be those exceptional persons about whom I just spoke, those who can stand aside and give up the world, as a snake casts off its skin and slithers away without once looking behind to admire the shedding of its past self. There are very few of these exceptional beings, but they do exist. And the rest of us have to go slowly through the world of work. Karma yoga shows the process, the secret, and the method of doing it to the best advantage. What does it say? Work incessantly and give up all attachment to work. Do not identify yourself with anything. Hold your mind free. Everything that you see, the pain, the miseries, the joys, the failures, are but the necessary conditions of this world. Poverty and wealth and happiness are all momentary. They do not belong to our real nature at all. Our nature is far beyond misery and happiness, beyond every object of the 5 senses, beyond the imagination and intuition of the 6th sense. And yet we must go on working every day, all the time. Misery only comes through attachment, not through the work itself. As soon as we identify ourselves with the work we do, we feel miserable. But if we do not identify ourselves with the work we do, we will not feel that misery. If a beautiful painting belonging to another is destroyed, a person does not generally become miserable. But if their own picture was destroyed, how miserable they would feel. Why? Both were beautiful paintings, perhaps copies of some original, but in one case, very much more misery is felt than in the other. This is because in one case, the person identifies themselves with their own picture that they think is theirs, but not in the other person's. This I and me and mine concept causes the whole of misery. With this sense of possession comes selfishness, and selfishness brings on misery. Every act of selfishness or thought of selfishness makes us attached to something, and immediately we are made slaves. Jealousy is slavery. Each wave of thought in the citta that says, me, mine, immediately puts a chain around us and makes us slave. And the more we say, I, my, me, mine, the more slavery grows, and the more misery increases, and the more chains hold us down. Therefore, Karma Yoga tells us to enjoy the beauty of all the pictures in the world, but not to identify ourselves with any of them. Never say, mine. Whenever we say a thing is mine, misery will come. Do not even say that your child is yours in your mind. Bring up the child to the best of your ability, but do not say that it is yours. If you do, then will come misery. Do not say, this is my house. Do not say, this is my body. The whole difficulty is there. The body is neither yours, nor mine, nor anybody's. These bodies are coming and going by the laws of nature, but we are free, standing as witness. This body is no more free than a picture or a wall. Why should we be attached so much to a body? If someone paints a picture, they do it and move on. Do not project a tentacle of selfishness. I must own this picture. I own this body. As soon as that projection is attached, misery begins. So Karma Yoga says, first destroy the tendency to project this tentacle of selfishness, of ownership. And when you have the power of checking it, hold the tentacle in and do not allow the mind to get into the ways of selfishness or ownership. Then you may go out into the world and work as much as you can. Mix everywhere with everyone. Go wherever you please. And you will never be contaminated with evil. There is the lotus leaf in the water. The water cannot touch and adhere to it. It immediately slides off. So will you be in this world. This is called vairaga, dispassion, or non-attachment. I believe I have told you that without non-attachment, there cannot be any kind of yoga. Non-attachment is the basis of all the yogas. The person who gives up living in a house, gives up fine clothing, gives up good food, and goes into the desert might be the most attached person. Their only possession, their only body, might become everything to them. And as they live, they will be simply struggling for the sake of their body. Non-attachment does not mean anything that we may do in relation to our external body. It is all in the mind. Attachment is all in the mind. The building link of I and my and me and mind is the mind. If we have not this link with the body and with the things of the senses, we are non-attached. Wherever and whatever we may be, whatever is happening around us. First, we have to attain the state of non-attachment and then work incessantly. Karma Yoga gives us the method that will help us in giving up all attachment, though it is not easy. Here are the two ways of giving up all attachment. The one is for those who do not believe in God or in any outside help. They are left to their own devices. They simply have to work with their own will, with the powers of their mind and discrimination, saying, I must be non-attached. That is it. For those who believe in God, there is another way which is much less difficult. They give up the fruits of work unto the Lord. They work and are never attached to the results. Whatever they see, feel, hear, or do is for the Lord. For whatever good work we may do, let us not claim any praise or benefit. Have no pride in anything you do. Everything is God's. Give up all fruits unto God. Let us stand aside and think that we are only servants obeying the Lord, our Master, and that every impulse for action comes from God every moment. Whatever thou worshipest, whatever thou perceivest, whatever thou doest, give it all unto God, and be at rest in your mind. Let us be at peace, perfect peace with ourselves, and give up our whole body and mind and everything external as an eternal sacrifice unto God. Instead of the sacrifice of pouring oblations into the fire or donating money at church, perform this one great sacrifice day and night, the sacrifice of your ego. In search of wealth in this world, thou art the only wealth I have found, it is said. I sacrifice myself unto thee. In search of someone to be loved, thou art the only beloved I have found. I sacrifice myself unto thee, O God. Let us repeat this day and night, saying, nothing for me, no matter whether it is good or bad or indifferent. I do not care for it. I sacrifice all unto God. Day and night let us renounce our seeming ego until it becomes a habit with us to do so, until it gets into the blood, into the nerves, into the brain, into the whole body, that every moment we are obedient to the idea of self-renunciation. You may go then into the midst of a battlefield with the roaring cannon and the din of death and dying, and you will find yourself to be completely free and at peace. Karma Yoga teaches us that the only idea of duty is on the lower 3D plane of ego. Nevertheless, all of us have to do our duty. Yet, we may see that this particular sense of duty is very often a great cause of misery in people around us. Duty becomes a disease for some. It drags them downward. It catches hold of them and makes their whole life miserable. This duty, this idea of duty, is the midday summer sun which scorches the innermost ego of mankind. Look at those poor slaves to duty all around you. Duty leaves them no time to say their prayers, no time to bathe. Duty is ever on them. They go out and work. Duty is on them. They come home and think of work for the next day. Duty is on them. It is living a slave's life, at last dropping down in the street and dying while still in a harness like a mule. This is duty as it is understood by most people. The only true duty is to be unattached and to work as free beings that you actually are, to give up all work unto God. All our duties are God's. Be at rest, be free, and do your work. This kind of freedom is quite hard to obtain. How easy is it to interpret slavery as duty and duty as slavery, the morbid attachment of flesh for flesh as duty, and the craving and lusting for money and property. Men go out into the world and struggle and fight for money and for any other thing to which they get attached. Ask them why they do it. They'll say, "I must. It is my duty." It is the absurd greed for gold and gain that they try to cover over with the few flowers of saying, "It is my duty." But what is duty after all? It is merely the impulse of the flesh, of our attachment. And when an attachment has become established, some of us call it duty. For instance, in a country where there was no marriage, there is no duty between husband and wife in these old tribal systems. But in countries where marriage comes, husband and wife live together on account of attachment to duty. And that kind of living together becomes settled after many generations, and when it becomes so settled, everyone is trapped in duty. It is, so to say, a chronic disease. When it is acute, we call it disease. When it is chronic, we call it nature. But it is a disease. So when attachment becomes chronic, we baptize it with the high-sounding name of duty after an incredibly expensive celebration where all our relatives cheer us on. We strew flowers upon it, trumpets sound for it, sacred texts are read over it, and then the whole world descends into drama and fighting, and men earnestly rob each other for this duty's sake. duty can be good to the extent that it checks brutality to the lowest kind of men who cannot have any other ideal. It is of some good to have a duty. But those of us who wish to be karma yogis must throw this idea of duty overboard. There is no duty for you and me, my friend. Whatever you have to give to the world, do give by all means, but not as a duty. Do not take any thought of that. Be not compelled by duty. Why should you be compelled? Everything that you do under compulsion goes to build attachments. Why should you have any duty? Resign everything unto God. It is in this tremendous fiery furnace where the fire of duty scorches everybody. Drink this cup of freedom nectar and be relieved eternally. We are all simply working out God's will and have nothing to do with rewards or punishments personally. If you want the reward, you must also have the punishment. The only way to get out of the punishment is to give up the reward. The only way of getting out of misery is by giving up the idea of happiness, because they are permanently connected. On the one side of the coin is happiness, on the other side of the same coin is misery. On the one side is life, on the other is death. The only way to get beyond death is to give up life. Life and death are the same thing, looked at from different points. So the idea of happiness without misery or of life without death is very good for little children. But any logical thinker sees that it is all a contradiction in terms and gives up both. Seek no praise. Seek no reward for anything you do. No sooner do we perform a good action than we begin to desire credit for it, looking around. See what I did? Pat my back. No sooner do we give money to some charity than we want to see our names blazoned in the paper or make a post on Facebook about it. Misery will come as the result of such desires. The greatest people in the world of the highest consciousness vibration have all passed away unknown. The Buddhas and the Krishnas and the Christs that we know are but secondary heroes in comparison to the truly great people of whom the world knows nothing. Hundreds of these unknown heroes have lived in every country working silently. Silently they live and silently they die, and in time their thoughts find expression in Buddhas or Christs. And it is these latter that become famous. The highest vibrating humans do not seek to get any fame or name for their knowledge. They leave their ideas to the world. They put forth no claims for themselves and establish no schools or systems in their names. Their whole nature shies away from such activities. They are the pure sattvikas who can never make any ripples in the pond, but only melt down in love. I have known one such yogi who lives in a cave in India. He is the most wonderful man I have ever met. He has so completely lost the sense of his own individuality that we may say that the man in him is completely gone, leaving behind only the all-comprehending sense of the divine. If an animal bites one of his arms, he is ready to give it his other arm also and say that this is God's will. Everything that comes to him is God. He does not show himself to others, and yet he is a magnet of love, of truth, and sweet ideas, also emanating from him. Next in order come the men with more rajas, or activity, those of combative nature who take up the ideas of the perfect ones and preach them to the world. The highest kind of men silently collect true and noble ideas. Others, the Buddhas and Christs, go from place to place preaching those ideas and working for them. In the life of Gautama Buddha, we notice him constantly saying that he is the 25th Buddha. The 24 before him are unknown to history, although the Buddha, known to history, must have built upon the foundations that they all laid for him. The highest vibrating people are calm, silent, and unknown. They are the people who really know the power of thought. They are sure that even if they go into a cave and close the door and simply think 5 true thoughts and then die, these 5 thoughts of theirs will live on through eternity. Indeed, such thoughts will penetrate through mountains, cross the oceans, and travel throughout the world. They will enter deep into human hearts and brains and rise up men and women who will give them practical expression in the workings of human life. These sattvika beings are too near to God to be active and to fight, to go out and to shout, to work and to struggle and preach and doing good, as they say, here on earth to humanity. The next level down, the active workers, however good, still have a little remnants of ignorance and ego and attachment left in them. When our nature has yet some impurities left in it, then alone can we work among other people. It is in the nature of work to be impelled ordinarily by motive and by attachment. In the presence of an ever-active providence who notes even the sparrow's fall, how can a man attach any importance to his own work? Will it not be a blasphemy to do so when we know that God is taking care of the minutest things in the world? We have only to stand in awe and reverence before God, saying, "Thy will be done." The highest men cannot work, for in them there is no attachment. Those with no attachment whatsoever, whose souls have gone into the God-self, whose desires are only those of God, who have become subsumed by the Creator. For them there is no work out among the people. Such indeed are the highest of humankind, but apart from them, everyone else has to work. In so working, we should never think that we could help even the least thing in this universe. We cannot. We only help ourselves in this gymnasium of the world. This is the proper attitude of work. If we work in this way, we will always remember that our present opportunity to work thus is a privilege which has been given to us. We shall never be attached to anything. Millions like you and me think that we are great people in the world, but we all die, and in 5 minutes the world forgets us. But the life of God, which is what you truly are, is infinite. Who could possibly live for a moment or breathe for a moment if the all-powerful Creator did not will it first? God is the ever-acting providence. All power, everything that exists, is God and within God's command. Through God's command, the wind blows, the sun shines, the universe spins, flowers bloom, and death stalks upon the earth. God is the all in all. We can only worship God as ourself worshiping God. Give up all the fruits of work. Seek not benefit. Do good for its own sake. Then alone will come perfect non-attachment. The bonds of the heart will thus break, and we shall reap perfect freedom. This freedom is indeed the goal of Karma Yoga. Chapter 8, the ideal of Karma Yoga. The grandest idea in the religion of the Vedanta is that we may reach the same goal by different paths. And these paths I have generalized into 4, called those of work, those of love, those of psychology, and those of knowledge. But you must, at the same time, remember that these divisions are not very marked and not quite exclusive of each other. In contrast, each blends into the other. But according to the type which prevails, we name the divisions. It is not that you can find a man who has no other faculty than that of work, nor could you find a person who is no more than devoted worshipping only, nor are there people who have no more than mere knowledge. These divisions are made in accordance with the type or the tendency that may be seen to prevail in a person. We have found that in the end, all these 4 paths converge and become one. All religions and all methods of work and worship lead us to the one and only goal. I have already tried to point out that goal. It is freedom, as I understand it. Everything that we perceive around us is struggling toward freedom, from the atom to the man, from the insistent, lifeless particle of matter to the highest existence on earth, the human soul. The whole universe is in fact the result of this struggle for freedom. In all combinations, every particle is trying to go on its own way, to fly free from the other particles, but the others are holding it in check. Our Earth is trying to fly away free from the sun, and the moon is trying to fly away free from the Earth. Everything has a tendency to infinite dispersion. All that we see in the universe has for its basis this one struggle towards freedom, spiraling, spiraling, spinning, spinning, spinning. It is under the impulse of this tendency that the saint prays and the robber robs. When the line of action taken is not a proper one, we call it evil. And when the manifestation of it is proper and high, we call it good. But the impulse is the same, this struggle towards freedom as interpreted by the individual. The saint is oppressed with the knowledge of his condition of bondage, and he wants to get rid of it. So he worships God. The thief is oppressed with the idea that he does not possess certain things, and he tries to get of that want to obtain freedom from it, so he steals. Freedom is the one goal of all nature, sentient or insentient. Consciously or unconsciously, everything is struggling toward the goal of freedom. The freedom which the saint seeks is very different from the freedom which the robber seeks. The freedom loved by the saint leads him to the enjoyment of infinite, unspeakable bliss, while that on which the robber has set his heart only forges other bonds for his soul. There is to be found in every religion the manifestation of this struggle towards freedom. It is the groundwork of all morality, of unselfishness, which means getting rid of the idea that men are the same as their little body. When we see a man doing good work, helping others, it means that he cannot be confined within the limited circle of me and mine. There is no limit to this getting out of selfishness. All the great systems of ethics preach absolute unselfishness as the goal. Supposing this absolute unselfishness can be reached by a man, what then becomes of him? He is no more little Mr. So-and-so. He has acquired infinite expansion. The little personality which he had before is now lost to him forever. He has become infinite. And the attainment of this infinite expansion is indeed the goal of all religions and of all moral and philosophical teachings. The personalist, when he hears this idea philosophically put, gets terrified. At the same time, if he preaches morality, he, after all, teaches the very same idea himself. He puts no limit to the unselfishness of man. Suppose a person becomes perfectly unselfish under the personalistic system. How are we to distinguish that person from the perfected ones in the system? They have become one with the universe, and to become that is the goal of all. Only the poor personalist has not the courage to follow out his own reasoning to the right conclusion. Karma Yoga is the attaining through unselfish work of that freedom, which is the goal of all human nature. Every selfish action, therefore, retards our reaching of the goal, and every unselfish action takes us toward the goal. That is why the only definition that can be given of morality is this: that which is selfish is immoral, and that which is unselfish is moral. But if you come to the details, the matter will not be seen as quite so simple. For instance, the surroundings often make the details different, as I have already mentioned. The same action under one circumstance may be unselfish and under another quite selfish. So we can give only a general definition and leave the details to be worked out by taking into consideration the differences in time, place, and circumstance. In one country, one kind of conduct is considered moral, and in another, the very same is immoral because of social circumstances. Yet the goal of all nature is freedom, and freedom is to be attained only by perfect unselfishness. Every thought, word, or deed that is unselfish takes us toward the goal, and as such can be called moral. That definition, you will find, holds good in every religion and every system of ethics. In some systems of thought, morality is derived from a superior being, God. If you ask why a man ought to do this and not that, the answer is because such is the command of God. But whatever be the source from which it is derived, their code of ethics also has the same central idea: not to think of self, to give up self. And yet some persons, in spite of this high ethical idea, are frightened at the thought of having to give up their little ego selves. We may ask the man who clings to the idea of little personality, the small self, the ego, to consider the case of a person who has become perfectly unselfish, who has no thought for himself, who has no deed for himself, who speaks no word for himself, and then say where his himself is. That himself is known to him only so long as he thinks, acts, or speaks for himself. If he is only conscious of others, of the universe, and of the all, where is his himself? It does not exist. Karma Yoga, therefore, is a system of ethics and religion intended to attain freedom through unselfishness and by good works. The Karma Yogi needs not believe in any doctrine whatever. He may not believe even in God. He may not ask what his soul is, nor think of any metaphysical speculation. He has got his own special aim of realizing selflessness, and he has to work that out for himself. Every moment of his life must be realization, because he has to solve, by mere work, without the help of doctrine or theory, the very same problem to which the Jnani applies his reason and inspiration in the bhakta of his love. Next comes the question again: what is this work? What is this doing good to the world? Can we do good to the world? In an absolute sense, no. But in a relative sense, yes, of course. No permanent or everlasting good can be done to the world. If it could be done, the world would not be this world. We may satisfy the hunger of a man for 5 minutes, but he will be hungry again. Every pleasure with which we supply a man may be seen to be momentary. No one can permanently cure this ever-recurring fever of pleasure and pain. Can any permanent happiness be given to the world? In the ocean of consciousness, we cannot make a wave without causing a hollow somewhere else. The sum total of the good things in this world has been the same throughout its relation to humanity's need and greed. The sum total of good things in this world cannot be increased or decreased. Take the history of humankind as we know it. Do we not find the same miseries and the same happiness? The same pleasures and pains, the same differences in position? Are not some rich, some poor, some high, some low, some healthy, some unhealthy? All this was just the same with the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans in the ancient times, as it is in the world today. So far as history is known, it has always been the same. Yet at the same time, we find out that, running along with all these incurable differences of pleasure and pain, there has always been the struggle to alleviate them. Every period of history has given birth to thousands of men and women who have worked hard to smooth the passage of life for others. And how far have they succeeded? We can only play at kicking the ball from one place to another. We take away pain from the physical plane and it goes to the mental one. It's like that picture in Dante's Hell where the misers were given a mass of gold to roll up the hill. Every time they rolled it up a little, it rolled down again. We cannot add happiness to this world. Similarly, we cannot add pain to it either. The sum total of the energies of pleasure and pain displayed here on earth will be the same forever. We just push it from one side to the other, and from this to that. But it will remain the same, because to remain so is its very nature. This ebb and flow, this rising and falling, is in the nature of the world. It would be as logical to hold otherwise as to say that we may have life without death. This is complete nonsense, because the very idea of life implies death, and the very idea of pleasure implies pain. The candle is constantly burning out, and that is its life. If you want to have life, you have to die every moment for it. Life and death are only different expressions of the same thing looked at from different standpoints. They are the falling and the rising of the same wave, and the two form one whole. One may look at the falling side and become a pessimist, while another looks at the rising side and becomes an optimist. Both are actually silly. When a child is going to school and their mother and father are taking care of them, everything seems blessed. Their wants are simple. I can become a great optimist. But an elder, with their varied experience, becomes calmer and is sure to have their warmth of optimism considerably cooled down. And so, old nations with signs of decay all around them are apt to be less hopeful than new nations. There is a proverb in India, 1,000 years a city, 1,000 years a forest. This change of city into forest and vice versa is going on everywhere at all times, and it makes people optimists or pessimists according to which side they see of it. The next idea we must take up is to look at that of equality. These millennium ideas of the New Age have been great motive powers to work. Even many religions preach this as an element in them, that God is coming to rule the universe, and that then there will be no difference at all in conditions. The people who preach this doctrine are mere fanatics, and fanatics are indeed the sincerest of people. Christianity was preached just on the basis of the fascination of this fanaticism, and that is what made it so attractive to the Greeks and the Roman slaves. They believed that under the millennial religion there would be no more slavery 2,000 years ago, that there would be plenty to eat and drink for everyone, and therefore they flocked around the Christian standard. Those who preached the idea first were, of course, ignorant fanatics, although very sincere. 2,000 later, this millennial aspiration takes the form of equality, of liberty, equality, and fraternity. This is also fanaticism. True equality has never been and never will exist on earth. How can we all be equal here? This impossible kind of equality implies death. What makes this world what it is? Imbalance, the moving wave. In the primal state, which is often called chaos, there is perfect balance. How do all of the formative forces of the universe come then? By struggling, competition, and conflict. Suppose for a moment that all of the particles of matter in the universe were held in equilibrium. Would there be any process of creation? No. Nothing whatsoever would move. We know from science this is ludicrous. If you throw a pebble into a pond, you will find the water eventually trying to become calm again, little ripples running out. And in the same way, all the phenomena which we call the universe, all things therein, are rippling and yet struggling to get back to the state of perfect balance. Again, another disturbance comes, and again we have a combination and creation, something new. Inequality is the very basis of creation. At the same time, the forces struggling to obtain equality are as much a necessity of creation as those which destroy equality. Absolute equality, that which means a perfect balance of all the struggling forces in all of the dimensions, could never exist. Before you attain that state, the world would have had to have become unfit for all life. No one could exist. We find, therefore, that all these ideas of the millennium and absolute equality are not only impossible, but also that, if we were to try to carry them out, they will lead us surely enough into pure destruction and constant frustration. What makes the difference between a person and another person? In our current life, it's largely the difference in their brain. Nowadays, no one but a lunatic would say that we are all born with the exact same brain power. We all come into the world with unequal endowments. We all have different skills and abilities and different defects and problems. There is no getting away from that prenatally determined condition relating to karma and DNA. The people most called the American Indians were in that country for 10,000 years. And then a few handfuls of European ancestors came to their land. What a difference those Europeans have caused in the appearance of America. Why did not the Indians make those so-called improvements or build cities if all people had some inbuilt equality? With European ancestors, a different sort of thoughts became outpictured and manifested. So long as this world exists, differentiation must exist. And this millennium concept of perfect equality will come only when the cycle of creation ends in the big shrink. Before that, equality cannot exist. Yet this millennial idea of realizing equality is a great motivation. Just as inequality is necessary for creation itself, so the struggle to limit it can also be seen as necessary. If there were no struggle to become free and get back to a state of godliness, there would be no creation either. It is the difference between these two forces that determines the nature of the motives of humanity. There will always be these motives to work, some tending towards bondage and others toward freedom. This world's grinding wheels within grinding wheels is a terrible mechanism. If we engage in it and become attached, we are gone. We all think that when we have done a certain duty, we shall be at rest. But before we have done a part of that duty, another is already waiting. We're all being dragged along by this mighty, complex machine. There are only two ways out of it. One is to give up all concerns with the machine, to let it go, and to stand aside, to give up all our desires. That is easy to say, but almost impossible to do. I do not know that whether in 20 million people even one could do that. The other way is to plunge into the world and learn the secret of work, the way of karma yoga. Do not seek escape from the wheels of the world machine, but stand inside it, take your place, and learn the secret of work. Through proper work done inside, it is possible to come out. Through this machinery itself is the way out. We have now seen what work is. It is a part of nature's foundation and eternally continues. Those that believe in God understand this better because they know that God is not such an incapable being as will need our help or our praise. Although this universe will go on always, our goal is freedom. Our goal is unselfishness. And according to karma yoga, that goal is to be reached through work. All ideas of making the world a perfectly happy place may be good as motive powers for fanatics. But we must know that fanaticism brings forth as much evil as good. The karma yogi asks why you require any motive to work other than the inborn love of freedom. Be beyond the common worldly motives. To work, you have the right, but not to the fruits thereof. Humanity can train themselves to know and to practice this, says the karma yogi. When the idea of doing good becomes a part of their very being, then they will not seek for any motive outside. Their internal satisfaction is already present. Let us do good because it is good to do good. They who do good work, even in order to get to heaven, bind themselves down, says the karma yogi. Any work that is done with any selfish motive, like getting to heaven, that's why I'm doing good, adds more chains to your feet. So the only way is to give up all thought of reward. Be completely unattached. Know that this world is not you. You are not this world. You are not your body. Your body is so that you may work. We are the soul, eternally at rest and at peace. Only the ego suffers. Only the ego can be attached. Only the ego seeks the fruits of its labors. Why should we be bound by anything? It is very good to say that we should be perfectly non-attached, but what is the way to do it? Every good work we do without any ulterior motive, instead of forging a new chain, will break one of the links in our existing chains. Every good thought that we send to the world without thinking of any return will be stored up there and break one link in the chain. These thoughts make us purer and purer until we become the purest of mortals. Yet all of this may seem to be rather quixotic and too philosophical, more theoretical than practical. I have read many arguments against the Bhagavad Gita, and many have said that without motives a person would never work. They have never seen unselfish work except under the influence of fanaticism, and therefore they have those opinions. Let me tell you in conclusion a few words about one man who actually carried this teaching of karma yoga into practice. That man is Buddha. He is the one man who ever carried this into perfect practice. All the prophets of the world, except Buddha, had external motives to move them into unselfish action. The prophets of the world, with this one exception, may be divided into two types. One type holding that they are incarnations of God come down on earth, and the other holding that they are messengers from God. Both types draw their impetus for work from external sources. Both types expect to be rewarded externally, however highly spiritual may be the language they use. But the Buddha is the only prophet who said, "I do not care to know your various theories about God. What is the use of discussing all the subtle doctrines about the soul? Do good and be good, and this will take you to freedom and to whatever truth there is." The Buddha was, in the conduct of his life, absolutely without personal motives. And what man worked more than he? Show me in history one character who has soared so high above all. The whole human race has produced only one such character, such high philosophy, such wide empathy. This great philosopher, preaching the highest philosophy, yet had the deepest sympathy for the lowest of animals, and never put forth any claims for himself. He is the ideal karma yogi, acting entirely without self-interests. And the history of humanity shows him to have been the strongest man ever born, beyond compare the greatest combination of heart and mind that ever existed, the greatest soul power that has ever been manifested in a body. He is the first great reformer the world has seen. He was the first who dared to say, "Believe not because some old manuscripts are produced. Believe not because it is your rational belief, because you have been made to believe it from your childhood. Believe not because your culture says to, but reason it all out. And after you have analyzed it, then, if you find that it will do good to one and all, believe it, live up to it, and help others live up to it. The person works best who works without any motive, neither for money, nor for fame, nor for anything else. And when a person can do that, they will be a Buddha. And out of them will come the power to work in such a manner as will transform the world. This person represents the very highest ideal of karma yoga.